India needs a specialized cadre for truly effective AI governance. Sectoral experts should be deployed across governance institutions to help make optimal use of AI. India recently unveiled a report to guide the governance of artificial intelligence, marking the country's first structured vision in the era of generative AI and transformative foundation models. While acknowledging AI's far reaching and cross sectoral impact, the report risks repeating past governance missteps by leaning too heavily on a centralized vision. The Pro Innovation report Condebly adopts a first principles approach and considers the role of diverse AI stakeholders, developers, deployers, and end users. It also lights the needs for multidisciplinary expertise from fields like law and economics. It aligns with global trends and discussing technology driven governance tools such as watermarking of AI generated content to curb disinformation and use of regulatory technologies for automating compliance. The report also reflects on the fluid nature of AI governance and avoids taking too prescriptive a lens. However, it doesn't go far enough. Despite advocating a whole of government approach, it suggests setting a concept centralized committee along with technical secretariat. India recently unveiled a report guiding the governance of artificial intelligence, marking the country's first structured vision in the era of generative AI. However, if it doesn't go far enough, despite advocating a whole of government approach, it suggests setting up a centralized committee along with technical secretariat. This structure, while familiar, would fail to address nuanced challenges posed by high technology in areas such as sectoral regulation and public procurement. India's regulatory bodies illustrate extant challenges in the sectoral oversight of tech markets. For instance, the Reserve Bank of India excels in monetary regulation but has hesitated to fully engage with fintech innovations like virtual digital assets, despite a dedicated fintech department and ample regulatory precedent globally. Similarly, while telecom authorities are good at licensing operators, they struggle to design practical security standards for next generation communications. India needs a cadre of specialized officers who can work at the intersection of regulation and technology because AI systems are heterogeneous and, and the associated governance challenges are differentiated. Problems diverse as bias in data classification systems and safety risks in automated decision making systems cannot be solved without understanding the underlying technology and market trends. Centralized state interventions in sectoral issues have also have a checkered past and tends to muddle efforts at tech governance. For instance, the Department of Legal Affairs tasked with supporting ministries with drafting and vetting laws and rules often fails to deliver on its mandate. This is perhaps why it has taken India more than a decade to conceive a workable statutory framework for data protection. The draft rules for which we were issued this month. A decade is a long time in a world of AI where an arms race is underway. Public procurement is another area primed to benefit from specialization. Consider requirements like the government's need for cloud computing and digital transformation. Departmental and public sector needs vary because application size and performance requirements, and most officials struggle to define these without industry help, creating conflict of interest. Globally renowned research organizations like the US National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA) offer role models for designing public procurement systems in high tech field precisely because of an abundance of in-house expertise. According to research by Mashekhar Shelkar, Shah and Thomas, over 75% of public process is going into NASA, go out to private firms, universities, and research organizations, showing high efficiency. Yet, even NASA is not happy with the pace at which it is innovating on public procurement. It is investing in finding procurement personnel who understand information technology rather than throwing IT personnel into public procurement. The eligible criteria The eligible criteria is to apply for even junior roles, includes the competition of several certifications in contracting and procurement, and a track record in implementing innovative strategies for acquisition. Specialized officers could transform all types of procurement in India and are essential in high-tech areas. Conversely, lack of expertise can lead to loss of precious public resources. Take satellite-based e-tolling for real-time traffic management. It has been under government evaluation for 5 years, but it yet to be deployed as a scale because of insufficient expertise to zero in on the right technical architecture. Building on India's success with the NIC, which embeds IT expertise across public institutions, a specialized AI cadre could bridge these identified gaps. The NIC has directly recruited cadre of IT professionals who are placed in other offices. Therefore, it cannot be anyone's case that a practical template for specialization doesn't exist. Of course, the government should be prepared to incur the search cost to identify right talent, devise training modules, and pay competitive salaries. This should be the first order of business for any centralized panel or secretariat. Police officers solve crime, doctors save patients, scientists innovate. Similarly, a specialized AI cadre can help India bridge its technological capability gaps through agile governance. The case for GST simplification in India is clear. It is time to act. A recent classification issued by Goods and Services Tax Council in December 24 meeting that caramelized popcorn would be grouped with sugar confectionery and taxed at 18% attracted much criticism. Attempts to justify this by arguing it helps control an epidemic of sugar-fueled obesity weaken on considering the inconsistent approach taken to taxing sugar confectionery, which falls under HSN code 1704. Taxation is not uniform. Some items like elaichi dana, chikki, gajak, etc. attract 5% GST, others like boiled sweets attract 12%, while the rest 18%. The reasons for this apparently arbitrary classification are not adequately explained. Some items are thought to merit preferential treatment for being traditional, while others are perceived to be consumed by the affluent and therefore deserving of higher taxes. The problem with such perceptions is that consumer preferences are dynamic. Items which may have been exclusive preserve of the rich can quickly become those of mass consumption. A walk in any weekly Haat Bazaar would reveal variety of goods once available in only high-end department stores. The mobile phone best illustrates this, having graduated from being a status symbol to an essential component of our public policy of inclusion. These complexities are compounded by litigation on these matters, with different courts making different interpretations of the state. For instance, 2018 Kerala Authority of Advanced Ruling decision that Malabar paratha be taxed at 80% overturned in 2024 by Kerala High Court, which placed it on par with bread and hence 5% slab. Referring to its earlier Supreme Court said it is a good fiscal policy to not put people in doubt and quandary about their liability to pay duty. Once a specific heading was created for coconut oil, something more would be required before such oil can be excluded therefrom and classified under general heading pertaining to toilet and cosmetic preparation. Good public policy should ideally reduce discretionary and arbitrary powers of the executive, though though this principle has been more honored in the breach than the observance. The original aim of GST was to end confusing litigation. Had it been a single rate, these decisions would not have been required in the first place. However, the government had then argued that keeping in mind India's heterogeneity and various requirements of public policy, charging all commodities uniformly would not be desirable. Items of mass consumption and those consumed by the poor were classified under a concessional rate, while luxury items and those of sin consumption attracted higher rates. While this principle is unexceptional, India's GST has two normal rates of 12% and 18%, plus a concessional rate of 5% and punitive rate of 28%. Goods are moved from one slab to another on perceived use characteristics with no statistical basis whatsoever. The pick and choose approach creates enormous flexibility for revenue authorities to interpret statutes as per their own convenience. This arbitrariness is further compounded by an opaque and unpredictable approach taken by tax authorities. In writing this article while searching for commodities and their tax classification under HSN heading 1704, the author observed that GST Secretariat repeatedly emphasizes that information on its site is neither competitive nor exhaustive, and the liability is entirely on taxpayers to find out the treatment applicable to their product or service. There is no doubt that GST is a significant improvement over the earlier excise and sales tax regime, where revenue departments in different states and center often took contrasting positions on the same commodity. However, while this has reduced, there is still much to be done. The manner in which GST has been implemented, reflected in both GST Council deliberations and legal disputes, seem to reveal a desire to return to old level of complexity. Ease of doing business reforms would require GST to be simplified in both letter and spirit. For example, at present, the GST Secretariat mandates the taxpayers report a minimum of 4 or 6 digits of HSN code in their returns based on their aggregate annual turnover in the preceding year. The reporting requirement has been kept at levels to ease the taxpayer's burden. In the same spirit and in accordance with the general principle enunciated by the Supreme Court, taxation should also be restricted to same broad HSN code classification. HSN code should attract the same tags. Whether 4-digit SSN code is grouped as concessional, normal, or punitive should be based on hard statistical data that describes the character of these goods' consumption, and not merely on assertion and appeals to popular sentiment. A GST regime with uniform rates based on clear statistical data within a broad HSN 4 or 6 digit category could enhance fairness, reduce disputes, and truly support the case of doing business, ease of doing business. AI regulation report broadly welcome but not entirely. Last week, the MITI released a report on regulatory framework for AI in India. While the recommendations themselves are largely non-controversial, the arguments on which they are based suggest an approach in regulation that will hold our artificial intelligence industry back from achieving all it can. In the first place, the report relies on regulatory principles developed by countries of the global north. While there is no harm in studying these approaches, we should give them some thought to how they will work in Indian context before imbibing them blindly. Countries make risk reward trade off that are appropriate to their advanced stage of development. To the global north, AI is nothing more than a tool that improves the efficiency of an already well functioning society. If the risk AI poses is too high, they can afford to forego some of its benefits it provides. For India, on the other hand, AI presents a unique opportunity to extend the progress we have achieved of those who still remain excluded from its benefits. For us, AI is not a luxury, it is a necessity, and if this is the only way we can quickly reach those sections of our society that are overlooked and underserved, we need to use it, even if that means taking a more aggressive approach to risk than Global North considers acceptable. The other problem with the report is to heavy reliance on techno-legal measures to achieve its ends. There is probably no one more in favor of embedding regulation into technology than me. I literally wrote a book on it, but just because we have a techno-legal hammer, that does not mean every regulatory problem is a nail. Just because we have techno-legal hammer does not mean every regulatory problem is a nail. Take for example the suggestion that we use mighty consent artifact to determine who is liable for AI harms. The report argues that if we assign immutable unique identities to participants in the AI ecosystem, we will be able to use the consent artification. Uh, we will be able to use the consent artifact to track and record their activities. That way, when any harm occurs, we can easily figure out who to blame. That the government is even thinking of using a protocol that lies at the heart of data empowerment and protection architecture to identify and track entities in this manner makes my skin crawl. Not only will this go against the grain of the privacy by design approach on which the entire ecosystem has been based, it is unmoved from the reality of how the ecosystem functions. Consent managers have no way to establish immutable and unique identities. More importantly, they cannot see the content being transferred through their pipes. To perform the activities that the report expects them to, we will need to contort the consent artifact into shapes it was never meant to assume. The report also refers to copyright issues that are commonly raised in connection with the development and deployment of AI. However, rather than making a clear recommendation of what needs to be done, the report has kicked the can down the road, calling for yet another consultation. In previous columns, I have called for an amendment of the Indian Copyright Act so that our developer community can benefit from the sort of fair use and text and data mining exemptions other countries have put in place. Why the report does not make a similar recommendation is beyond me. That said, there is so much there is much to welcome in the report. I agree with this finding that there is no need for us to enact a specific legislation for AI and that our existing laws and regulations are more than capable of addressing the new risk it might bring about. I am also glad that it has highlighted the need to train our regulators and law enforcement authorities on the harms AI can raise so that they can suitably alter the way they approach regulation and supervision. I wholeheartedly endorse the two institutional recommendations that it makes: the constitution of an interministerial AI coordination committee for AI governance and establishment of secretariat for technical advice. Given the cross-cutting nature of AI, we would do well to coordinate at high levels. If AI generates misleading advertisements in the financial sector, it is every likelihood that the same techniques would be used in other sectors of the economy. It is only by applying the learnings in one sector to another other context that we will be able to prevent the harms from repeating. At the present time, given the speed at which the technology is evolving, it will be very useful to have a body tasked with providing technical advice and evaluating AI incidents. I am so glad I am also glad that the report makes it clear that the primary objective of incident reporting should not be to find fault but to mitigate any future harms. It is only when we create incentives for companies to share their experiences that the entire industry will be able to learn from the collective experience and mitigate harms before they become widespread. If the report is to be judged solely on the basis of its recommendations, it has the right mix of agile governance and light touch supervision, but it also explains how these conclusions were arrived, offering us a window to how the government is thinking. If the Western risk force focused approach that underpins much of the thinking behind the report also extends to enforcement, Indian AI companies are going to find very difficult, very hard to innovate. The civilization that nurtures its needs also produces the tech that enables its eradication. Can we commend privacy? The legacy of K.S. Puttaswamy, who passed away in October, is intertwined with growing and constantly changing concern regarding privacy in today's world. All the on the grounds that UPA's Aadhaar scheme breached citizens' privacy, Justice Puttaswamy's petition, the Supreme Court in 2012. In 2017, a 9-judge constitution bench headed by Justice J.S. Keher upheld the Aadhaar scheme. Nonetheless, privacy was unanimously recognized as a fundamental right. However, to what extent do we, the common people, truly comprehend and more significantly cherish our own privacy? In the context of American society, an article Right to Privacy by Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis, published in the Harvard Law Review in 1890, was articulated primarily as right to be let alone. Brandeis, who later served as an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court during 1916 to 1939, described this right as the most comprehensive of rights, the right most valued by civilized man. Any discussion of privacy anywhere on the global ought to include reference to George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. A totalitarian regime was modeled in his book. Surveillance is a recurring theme therein, and if we look at it from a modern standpoint, is that the mark of an internet driven and artificial intelligence powered surveillance. Joan Stern, a Wall Street Journal columnist, explained in an April 2023 article how she replaced herself with AI voice and voice to see how human-like and technology can be. Her AI clone deceived her bank and her family, which led to unsettling repercussions. Therefore, in the age of social media and AI, the idea of privacy has been redefined. Carissa Weiss of the University of Oxford reveals in her 2020 book Privacy is Power how tech companies are harvesting and sharing our local like habits, relationships, anxieties, and medical issues without our knowledge or consent. They are selling not just our data but also the liability to sway and make decisions for us and also for our connections and our fellow citizens. Privacy thus is as collective as its personal perceived feels. AI can redefine healthcare. India is on the cusp of significant transformation in its healthcare sector. Healthcare leaders across the country driving this transformation by adopting the latest technologies like AI, advanced analytics, and virtual care and automation. So long, net neutrality and good riddance. But amidst this growth, a few immediate challenges. This will AI latest technologies include AI, advanced analytics, virtual care, and automation. This will redefine care is delivered in a more efficient and patient-centric manner. These advancements promise to enhance the quality of care and make healthcare more accessible, personalized, and timely for millions of Indians. Next is one of the longest, most technical, and it turns out most inconsequential public policy debates of the 21st century was about net neutrality. Now that the Federal Appeals Court has effectively ended the debate by striking down the FCC's net neutrality rules, it's worth asking what we have learned. In 2015, during President Barack Obama's presidency and after a year of debate, the Federal Communications Commission issued something called an Open Internet Order guaranteeing net neutrality, which is broadly defined as principles of Internet service provider treat all communications equally, offering both users and content providers consistent service and pricing. 2 years later, President Donald Trump, if the FCC rescinded the net neutrality requirement, it was then restated under Joe Biden until being struck down earlier this month. If you have forgotten all this, or more likely never knew in the first place, it's hardly a surprise. Those legal changes do not correlate with significant changes in anyone's actual internet experience. Had I not been following these debates, I would have not noticed any changes at all, and I live on the internet for a significant proportion of my day. So, what are the lessons here? First, during the initial debates for net neutrality, the argument was repeatedly that without net neutrality, was essential for freedom of speech and freedom of internet. Without net neutrality, according to this line of reasoning, few small corporations would decide what which content could get through the pipes, and they would charge more content they found objectionable or unprofitable. There was even talk that people would have to pay for the internet one day at a time. The actual reality has been somewhat different. Bandwidth had expanded, and the Netflix transmissions do not interfere with Facebook or vice versa. There is plenty of excess to go around, and there has been the case during periods with net neutrality and without. So, one lesson of the net neutrality debate comes from the economics. Supply is elastic, and at least where regulation allows to be. So, some thinkers on the left favor what they call the abundance agenda as a way of resolving disputes for allocation and distribution. Legal rationing or fixing the equal prices is not needed if private suppliers can create enough for everyone. The fact that net neutrality debate has turned into a nothing burger should raise the status of abundance agenda. Another lesson is to beware of predictions that sky is falling. The ACLU, for instance, said that net neutrality was urgently needed to close the digital divide. Comedian John Oliver warned that without net neutrality, the streaming industry might crash. Tim Wu, the Columbia Law University law professor and internet expert, called the initial institution of net neutrality a historic day in the history of internet. Sadly, internet commentators do not always have a firm grasp of economics. The internet of the 1990s developed under the sway of an anti-corporate non-conformist spirit. I enjoyed the mode then, and sometimes I wish for a bit more of it now. Still, good vibes are no substitute for careful analysis. They tend to lead a lot of knee-jerk predictions that are unlikely to pan out. The main complaints about internet today concern its harmful impact effects on minors, its possible links to psychological depression, and overuse of pornography. What links all these criticisms is an of excess of internet, the opposite of what proponents of net neutrality warned about. Markets are very good at expanding output for better or worse. One final lesson from the net neutrality debate has to do with free speech and term itself. Many advocates continue to be keen to control and regulate the transmission of information across the internet, especially content they deem disinformation. They are essentially calling for the censors to limit the speech for some users. Protestations of neutrality rarely favor actual concept. They may not evaluate any speech, but they evaluate the role of the censor. Net neutrality is gone again. I, for one, will not miss it. Focus on boosting labor intensive sectors for growth. The changing skies of weather office. Dam building spree is a zero sum game. Odisha must act on its law and order pledge. Speak, Mr. Governor. Speak. RBI must communicate its signal it's in charge of the currency front. Getting what you want. Echo chamber. RBI must communicate to signal it's in charge of the things on currency front. RBI's repetitive actions to defend the rupee against the odds may have fostered an aversion among the importers and borrowers to cover all their bases. The currency market should be allowed to reflect to some degree the play of demand and supply. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.